So Romanticism and Gothicism as literary tools are very humanistic. And so there are some very humanistic themes in the stories that we read in this episode. Both of them contain discussion of self-harm and suicide. So we want to issue this as a trigger warning. And
if you or anyone you know are suffering from thoughts of self-harm or suicide, we will have resources at the end of the episode and in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. And with that,
hi, my name is Drew. I'm a sociologist.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm a media production specialist. And this is
Everyone Should Read,
the podcast where we go through books, plays, sonnets, short stories, essays, pamphlets sometimes. And we break down stories that you might have heard of, you have had concepts of, you might have heard how it ends or the big twist, but you haven't necessarily read the whole thing.
Everything you've been told that you probably should read to be a well-rounded, good individual.
Something that's been assigned in school at some point, whether or not you got all the way through it.
It may have gone up in smoke. We're reading them. We're reading those things for you, and we are talking about them. We're picking them apart, and we're kind of telling you at the end, like, whether or not we think it's worth it, combining our expertise.
Yeah. And we are in the season of Gothic literature.
Which has been a great season so far. I've been having a lot of fun doing this.
I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah.
Some of it's heavier than others.
I agree.
But I think that it's really worth diving deep into Gothic literature as a whole. And Gothic literature is anti-enlightenment, anti-establishment, anti-colonialism, and anti-racism. And we've already done the first three pretty well. So today's episode is very focused on the anti-racism. And because of that, we have some things that we'd like to preface at the beginning of the episode before we dive deep into the text.
Yes, we do. And in talking about this, it's I am a sociologist. I focus on like patterns of American identity formation. Of course, that's like a big part of my research. A lot of my work is in service of that. And so when I think about the United States as an entity, as a whole, I think about all of the things that came into its being. And I think about how interesting they are, like how they work together. And I end up taking, I think, a place of depth that we don't usually end up taking in large-scale sort of collective zeitgeist conversations amongst the culture. And a big part of that is the discussion around slavery. And a lot of the time we talk about slavery as like a collection of atrocities, and it's like a really bad thing, and now it's over. And this is all true, but when
it is a bad thing.
It is awful thing, right? Like
we're not discounting that.
But when we study sociology, they tell us to bring in sort of everything, international politics and political science and economics and developmental psychology and all of these things. And in taking the sort of sociological lens to an analysis of slavery, especially in the United States, one of the things that we often miss, or at least I don't think gets enough attention, is what slavery represented as an institution. And when we say things like institutional racism and slavery as an institution, like they're buzzwords at this point. I feel like they lose a lot of their weight. But slavery as an economic institution was so fundamental to the success of the United States. And it was so fundamental to a class of people, and how within this class, both of them saw slavery as like an object. You know, it was akin to the Industrial Revolution, but a little bit before the Industrial Revolution, because it was the sort of like pinnacle of like an agrarian society, like agrarian wealth. And textiles are something that we use every day. Clothes and bed sheets and drapes and napkins and like all of these are textiles. These are made from cotton. Like this comes from somewhere. It makes a lot of money. There's a lot of money moving around. Everything you see in a mall comes from money, or it comes from cotton and textile production. And there's money to be had, as we know, if you can buy stock in Forever 21, et cetera. And so when we think about slavery as an economic institution, and we think about slaves as being both human capital and generation of capital, like both labor and investment capital at once, you could use these people to pay off your loans. You could pay them off. You could borrow against them. You could refinance your slaves, kinds of things. Like they were treated like tractors, like sentient tractors or like materials. And so when we think about slavery in that context, and then we think about conversations about slavery, like obviously understanding what we do about neuroscience and psychology, it is extremely traumatic to live that way for a very long time, and to have your children raised that way and their children raised that way. And even when that institution is abolished ostensibly, there becomes a vacuum of economic engine, like forward motion. And, that's not just a way of life that you're going to give up. Like, okay, slavery's over, like we did a bad thing, like all of these billions of dollars of commerce, like we'll just let it grind to a halt. That is not what happened. They had to find ways to fill that gap. And as that happened, again, like people become the capital because there is no way to really, even with the Industrial Revolution, I think, there is no way that they thought of to really sub in something else to the novel institution of human capital that they were having. And so as we have conversations around slavery and like agriculture, specifically because one of the books we're talking about today is Beloved. It's just something to keep in mind. And it's kind of any conversation about slavery and any story about the aftermath of slavery is a story about life after being a tool for so long, like developing personhood. And that is a crazy thing to think about. It is a crazy, like, Jim Crow aside, water fountains aside, bathrooms aside, like sitting at the countertop aside, like being a tool and a sentient human being for hundreds of years and then having that transfer but not go away, change its shape is crazy. That is crazy things to a person. And so that's just something to keep in mind as we get into this. And I know I sound like a little enthused about it, but it's because it's so fascinating. And so that's something to keep in mind as we get into what we're talking about today. It's crazy stuff.
Yeah, and a through line that will come up in both of the stories that we discussed today, both Beloved and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, is that a narrative that is popular today in pop culture is the idea that, like, trauma builds you up and makes you a better person. And you're like, oh, I am the way that I am because of this. But sometimes a traumatized person is just a traumatized person.
Absolutely.
It does not necessarily indicate growth.
Not always.
Or change of behavior.
And even when we study these things in the social sciences, we talk about like resilience building factors and like how you develop resiliency. And there is no equation. There's no like a little bit of trauma here and a little bit of like one supportive adult figure here. Like it's not a story. It is not so black and white. Like resiliency building factors are so mercurial. They're all over the place. And so you never know if the trauma is going to make you a better person.
Yes. There's a bit about like, oh, just enough trauma to make me funny. That's not really how...
That's not how it works.
You don't get to pick and choose.
It's true. And part of this podcast, I think the value in this podcast is that we are restoring nuance. We are not going to let it file it away. And like, it's funny to say, like, oh, a little bit of trauma to make me funny. But like, that's not what happens, guys. It's really bad. Like, it's not a good thing. We wouldn't wish this really on anyone.
No. And while we understand having a dark sense of humor as a coping mechanism,
absolutely,
these stories don't really lend themselves to humor.
Not these ones. No, not these ones. There are ones that do. These are not those.
These are
ones.
not them. So with that
said,
like I said, we'll be doing Beloved and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. They have very different story concepts and arcs, and yet they are very similar in the fact that the way that people grow up, are raised, and are spoken to, and the expectations that are lived in the American South are very strict.
They're very strict.
The way that the family structure is established and what your expected role is within a family is very strict.
There's this element of caste that competes with this sort of element of agency. And these are, yes, partially owed to the idea of Americanness, but one of the books that I always bring up when we're talking, outside of the podcast, is American Nations by Colin Woodard, of course. And he talks about sort of the settlement patterns of the American South and the idea that there was a group that really benefited on caste, these like sort of planter elite of the American South. But then there were also like several waves of Scots-Irish and Ulster Scots who moved in. They really believed in this culture around individuality and like, I take care of mine, me and mine only. And those two things kind of fuse to marry into what becomes what we think of as the culture of the South, I think.
And the staunch American individualism that is pervasive in our society even today.
I agree.
To what I believe is generally to the detriment of community.
I absolutely agree. And it's sort of the contention between these two things that comes across in both of our books in a really, really, really good way. And we're going to be departing a little bit from our normal way of discussing, not just because these books are heavy, but also because like moving forward, we don't want to spoil the whole book, but we also kind of want to,
we want you to be able to read it without knowing how it ends necessarily.
Yeah.
Every once in a while we might be like, oh, spoiler alert, everyone dies.
Right.
But that's just inherent in Gothic literature.
Naturally.
There's a lot of death. Not necessarily in our stories today, though. And also something that I'm excited to talk about in what I'm presenting today is because it's a play. the way that it is interpreted in all of the different adaptations changes the story.
Absolutely.
And I love that.
That's one of my favorite sort of characteristics of plays.
Yes.
Right? Like the actors get to interpret, the director gets to interpret.
And who you cast makes a difference.
Okay. So you know what? I don't want to like waste any more time on preamble. I just want to I'm just going to get into Beloved.
Yes.
And I'll open up the floor and we can let it ebb and flow.
I'm so excited for this.
So Beloved is a story about generational trauma, like right off the bat. Like we'll just start there. And a brief overview of the mechanics of generational trauma, because we don't fully understand, the nuances of epigenetics. Like genetic science is still very limited. But what we can understand about how trauma is reproduced within families is that a traumatized person does get there are impacts. There are physiological and neurological impacts. It does change the way that they function. And as that changes the way that they function, if they then decide to have children, as their children are coming up during the most critical periods, that first 5 to 7 years of primary socialization, whatever they are sort of subjected to, the inconsistencies, the volatility, that impacts their long-term development. It impacts their coping strategies. It impacts how stress is sort of responded to and identified within the brain, and how the entire body responds to stress over time. And in that way, it can dysregulate them as well. And then if they go on to have children, the same thing happens. And this is why we talk about the idea of breaking cycles. And I often think about people who say, my parent is really quick to fly off the handle. Like they're really mean to me all the time. They can be really vitriolic. They're very unpredictable. And we see this a lot and we talk about this a lot. But part of the reason why is because that is neurological dysregulation. That is long-term untreated neurological dysregulation.
And something that is important to stop and think about for just a moment is how many years of collective trauma does it take to consider something cultural?
Right.
Like if everyone around you is doing it, if everyone's mom, grandma, grandfather behaves in this way, is it part of your culture and your society, or is it something that is individual or unique to the family unit?
Right. And I think that's also there's a shame around a lack of composure that prevents us from recognizing these patterns in other families and talking about them, that has sort of held us back from these kinds of dialogues for a very long time. And I think that is why books and stories like these become so successful.
Yes. So get in. Let's tell them about who our characters are, where our story takes place. You guys are in Ohio, right?
We are in Ohio. We are during the Reconstruction South. So this is just after the Civil War. We have Setha. We have her daughter, Denver. And we have... Also, we have Baby Suggs. We have Baby Suggs, who is Setha's mother-in-law, the mother of the man that she married and had Denver with. And we have these 3 generations of women, basically, is what this story's about. And, I don't want to tell the entire synopsis of the story, but it's these 3 generations of women. And Toni Morrison has a unique chronology, I think, with this story. And she so much of what we learn to contextualize the present happens through recollection, and it happens through memory. And a big part of that memory is sort of prompted in Setha. She sort of remembers her time in slavery. She remembers her time as that human capital, and now she is ostensibly free, but she was alive during the time when she was property through the war, and now she's free. And she's living with all of that. And it is in living with all of that and that existing inside of her and the complexity and the complication of it that changes the way she experienced her life. And so we have Baby Suggs, her mother-in-law, who talks about her children. And she says, eventually I had to stop loving them. I had to learn to stop loving my children, because if I love them, it only hurts more when they are taken away. And this is the context that she brings. And Setha is a transitional context. And Denver comes of age and develops her abstract thought in a world where slavery is over, but it's something else now. It's that very distinct something else. And so, I want to tell a quick story that is analogous to this about my grandmother. My grandmother was born in 1948 in Louisiana, and she was born on a plantation. And she was made to work with everyone else in her family. And when she was about 5 years old, her family, in the middle of the night, they packed up their bags and they fled from wherever they were in rural Louisiana to Monroe, Louisiana. And they stayed there for a while before eventually migrating to Oakland, California. And that is obviously extremely traumatic. Being born on a plantation in 1948 is extremely traumatic. Living that way, like I said, those 5 to 7 years, that is your primary socialization. That being your reality, that relationship to forced labor as your reality, that relationship to your parents who have been living like that for the whole time, their dysregulation, that is your reality. Obviously, you too become dysregulated. Also, she was one of many children, and some sort of young young research in sociology that I was reading not too long ago is what happens in birth order. What happens when you're like one of the first three born, and like how that changes your perception of self as more children come up. That is also, I will say, what's the word? I don't want to say a traumatizing factor, but it definitely changes your relationship to yourself and the way your brain thinks, and also your idea of how important you are to the family unit.
And your relationship with your parents and your other siblings,
Absolutely.
everything else.
And so all of that is, so that is trauma. All of that together is trauma. And that is trauma that my grandmother grew up with in Oakland in the 50s and 60s. That is something that she did not work through. Of course, that's not something she worked through. And she met my grandfather, and they had my mother and my aunt. And my mother and my aunt were raised in the context of this unresolved trauma. And obviously, this is dysregulating. And my mother and my aunt are both on their own very complex journeys. And there's a lot of ebb and flow. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of forgiving yourself. There's a lot of hard conversations. My mom and I have been having hard conversations since I started studying sociology when I was 15. You know, I'm like, Mom, have you considered this? Like, I read this the other day. Have you thought about this?
But she's very happy to engage in those conversations with you,
absolutely.
and you're so lucky to have such a responsive person.
Extremely fortunate, and I fully acknowledge that. And when we talk about like the idea of breaking generational curses, as I'm doing all of this research, and I'm the first person in my family to go to college, the first of my mother and my cousins and my grandparents and all of these things, as the first person in my family to experience this and break these curses, it becomes like this sort of status of this curse breaker. And you see over just 3 generations how these fundamental changes happen. And that is a perfect analog to the events of Beloved. Chronologically, they unfold in this way where they each reckon with their histories differently.
Would you say you see yourself in Denver?
You know what? Only a little. Only a little.
You and Denver are very different.
Yes. Denver and I are very different, but I will say that like the idea of like I will be the one to go out and do the uncomfortable thing because it is a little foreign. I think Denver and I absolutely agree on that. But also just, you know, the time periods in which we locate ourselves are so different. You know, I'm in a like post-Panthers Oakland, California, you know, and she's in a Reconstruction South. So crazy, crazy ways to grow up.
She's also a Black woman.
She's also a Black woman.
There's a lot
right?
more to unpack there. And talk about, she does leave the house, but why?
So she leaves the house when okay, so she does go on like an outing with Paul, and she returns, and Beloved is there. She goes out with her mother.
Who is Paul?
Paul is another man who was on the plantation with Setha, and he comes back and he sort of invokes this youthful sort of girlhood in Setha, this girlhood that she never felt like she was able to embody because she was trying to take responsibility for a freed self.
Yeah, she never had the opportunity.
Not really, no. You know, and even in raising Denver, and they had a meaningful relationship, but Denver describes her mother as this very imperious woman and not terribly open.
Well, and there's a famous quote from Beloved,
Yeah.
which is freeing yourself is one thing,
Mm-hmm.
claiming ownership of that freed self is another.
Yeah.
And so that is the journey that Seth is sort of like going on.
It is the journey that she's going on. And I feel like within the story, it is not a journey that comes to a completion with Setha. I feel like it is a multi-generational journey that Denver inherits responsibility for, which is really, really interesting. And it is that sort of multiple, you know, generational collective knowledge and that resolution of a sort of through line that I think comes across in Bill. And I think that's what makes it such a good, you know, compelling story. And so Denver, eventually, she's like, you know, I've had enough of this. I'm going out on my own. I'm going to go build this life for myself. We are separated from the community, and we find out both it's because, you know, they have this home and, you know, this sort of togetherness and baby Suggs, and they envy that a little bit. But also, it's this idea of there's a stigma around Setha because she kills her children when she thinks that she is being taken back to the plantation. When she thinks they have come back to...
This happens before the story gets started.
This happens before the story gets started, but it is resolved, we find out, as the story progresses. But she kills her children, and the people in town are so horrified. But she does this as an act of love in the same way that baby Suggs has to meter her love to cope with the loss of her children. It is such a compelling narrative. And it's like this element of Gothicism that is almost taken for granted so much in like Black diasporic culture, because Gothicism is eerie, it's ominous, it's ghost stories, it's reckoning with the unknown. And Beloved begins the story as like a ghost, a non-corporeal ghost who haunts their house that everyone kind of accepts and acknowledges. And she is representative of the trauma. She's one of the children that Setha killed. And she is representative of the trauma of all of the hurt, you know, that twisted love and like the vengeance from being loved in this way that's too hard. Really, really, really compelling sort of narrative. So she employs Gothic elements in this really meaningful, useful way. And I just think that's just, I have no notes. I really have no notes. It's just so effective to communicate. And that's basically the story, right? The story is the resolution of these memories. And we learn the memories. We watch them resolve it in real time. Beloved comes back. Setha is guilty. She feels guilty for harming her child and taking that away. And she's trying to make up for that. And that's also, I think, Morrison uses that as a way of sort of wanting to relitigate your own trauma. And that is, in some way, and for some people that can be a solution, but the relitigation of trauma is not itself a solution. Acknowledging that it happened, recognizing it as trauma, and letting that inform how you move forward away from the trauma is how you move through it and heal, according to at least my interpretation of Morrison's work. Because as she continues to give so much of herself to Beloved grows full. She grows like distended and round. She takes on this image of like a pregnant woman, and it's almost like Setha is like, I can have a chance to start again. But in that way, she becomes sallow. Her cheeks become hollow. She becomes so thin. She has no
Beloved
energy.
is almost vampiric in the way that she feeds off of the energy of her mother.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's also an allegory for grief. That's an allegory for the grief that she felt, and how that decision that she made, that relationship that she would have had with her daughter, was taken from her by her fear, by her trauma. And yeah, I could go on.
Okay, so one last thing before we step away.
Switch gears. Yeah.
Toni Morrison has a line where she talks about thin love.
Yeah.
Can you unpack thin love for us?
Yes. So this is in the context of where Paul finds out that Setha killed her children. And he says to her, he goes, basically he says, what's wrong with you? Your love is too thick. She says, I did this because I love them. I did this because I did not want them to live in bondage. And Paul says, your love is too thick. He means to say it's cloying. It's hard to take down because you killed your children. Like, how can I conceive of that? And Setha says, in response, thin love is no love at all. And I'm sorry, but
so
going
good.
back
She
to Baby
ate
Suggs,
with that.
she did. Well, because thin love is no love at all. And Baby Suggs, in order to allow her to be okay with her children indeed coming into the world and then being taken away from her, she says, I cannot love them, right? That is the love that enables her children to live is a thin love that is no love at all. Is what Baby Suggs says at the beginning, at the top of the story. And Setha says, thin love is no, she says that. And she's the one who, again, it's that collective knowledge. It's a callback to Baby Suggs, who was her, yes, mentor, but she was also waiting for her when she got out because her son, Hallie, bought her freedom.
Well, and Baby Suggs was the matriarch of not just this family, but of this society and the community at large. And there is a lot to be said about the loss of matriarchal knowledge when Baby Suggs passes.
Yes.
Part of the way through this story, and how that knowledge, that institutional lore doesn't get passed on the way that we as a reader maybe feel it should.
And I think that sort of lack of satisfaction, that incompleteness, was part of Morrison's intention. Of course it was, right? If we're talking about trauma, there's so many things that we don't get to get in their completion. There's closure that we don't get to get. And we don't get to relitigate trauma always. It's really, I think, a very effective storytelling tool. And again, it really brings us into an intimate perspective of what it is to, in just 3 generations, go from property to agency, and the volatility of transition and how important that is. All through the lens of, Gothic ideals and the family structure, and in keeping with Gothic ideals and the family structure and literary tools. Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Let's talk about it.
Okay, speaking of family expectations and where your family starts and where it comes from, and the understanding of what the family structure looks like or should look like, or how it should or should not behave. Tennessee Williams wrote Cat on a Hot Tin Roof in 1955. It is a Pulitzer-winning play, 3 acts that take place over the course of one night on a plantation in the Mississippi Delta. Okay. Mississippi Delta is famous for being where the majority of cotton plantations existed. That is not mentioned in the play, but that is important for context. We are in time in the 1950s, and this story takes place on the eve of Big Daddy's birthday. He is the patriarch to this family, and something that's really important to understand is that the plantation that he now owns and runs is the largest, the most profitable in all of the Mississippi Delta.
Mhm.
Originally, he was the foreman on this plantation, and it was owned by these two confirmed bachelors who there was only one bad, guys, but they were just roommates.
Just roommates in one bed, confirmed bachelors.
Yes. When they passed, they left the plantation to Big Daddy.
Mm-hmm.
Big Daddy has a large-ish family because of how it grew. He has two sons,
Mm-hmm.
Brick and Grouper. All of the names are going to be so ridiculous, guys. I'm so sorry.
It's the South.
It is how it goes. So Big Daddy and his wife, Big Mama, have Grouper.
Excellent.
Grouper married May, who was like a cotillion lady. Debutante. She was a pageant queen. They have 5 children who were referred to as no-neck monsters. The play is written so that the children can be somewhere between 3 and 5 children.
Okay.
And May is also pregnant with the next one. The audience needs to understand that, like, no one likes these children. No one likes May and Grouper. They are insufferable. Grouper has gone on and he's become a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
He's a corporate lawyer.
Gross.
Yeah.
Gross.
So sorry to all of our corporate lawyer
Respectfully.
friends. Grouper's not one of the good ones. Brick is everybody's favorite.
Of course.
He is a sports star, goes on to play collegiate ball, professional ball, and then when he retires from that is an announcer. His wife, Margaret, or Maggie the cat, depending on who you were talking to, grew up in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And so the enormous wealth of this family is almost upsetting and unsettling to her.
I see.
In a way that May expects it and May demands it.
As a debutante.
As someone who grew up in a wealthy society.
Mm-hmm.
May has an expectation that she will inherit all of this because she married the first son.
Mm-hmm.
And she is due, and she has all of these children.
Yeah. She's done everything right.
Brick and Margaret do not have children. Brick and Margaret have not been married very long. And this is where the story starts.
Mm-hmm.
The entire play takes place in Brick and Margaret's bedroom.
Wow. Okay. Crazy staging.
Crazy staging. In the 1958 film adaptation, there are other scenes. There are other places and locations.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the intimacy of the entire play taking place in one bedroom of a couple who is not currently sleeping together, and that is like a crucial element of their story, is really impactful.
Again, that snapshot of the internal
Yes,
family
the
life.
internal struggle and the family having all of these conflicts interpersonally amongst all of them. This is a family where no one likes each other.
Some of you have been there. We know the story.
Big Daddy hates Big Mama.
Mm-hmm.
He hates Grouper.
Mm.
Grouper hates Brick. Brick hates everyone.
Yeah.
And Brick is kind of going through it right now.
Mm-hmm.
Brick's best friend, Skipper. Again, I'm so sorry. All these names are so embarrassing. Also, I'm super sorry if your name is Grouper, Brick, or Skipper, and I have offended you.
Nothing but respect for you, Grouper, Brick, Skipper.
I don't know what Tennessee Williams was talking about, but he did choose Tennessee as his own pen name. So, like, there's a lot. His name was Thomas. There's a lot going on there. We're a little dramatic in Tennessee Williams' world.
I mean, hey.
We're a lot dramatic in Tennessee Williams'
He's
world.
a playwright. What can we say?
He's a playwright. He had issues with alcohol and drugs and all sorts of things going on in his own life.
Yes.
And was famously the kind of person who said, everything in my life ends up in my plays and everything in my plays ends up in my real life.
Crazy bleed through there.
Crazy bleed
That
to the
alone is
point
Gothic.
where Brick's best friend Skipper was not as good as Brick. Was not going to make it to the pros the way Brick was.
Mm-hmm.
And so Brick, with the enormous amount of wealth that he has through Big Daddy, starts his own professional football team.
Oh.
To give his best friend a job.
Oh.
Because who wouldn't?
And they were roommates.
And they were roommates. No, they weren't.
Oh, okay.
But Skipper really wishes they were. And this is a problem that Maggie has.
Okay.
Because remember, Maggie is married to Brick.
Right.
And there is an away game where Brick is injured and he's not there, and Skipper has a terrible game. And Maggie goes up to Skipper afterwards, and she's like, we need to have a serious conversation.
Okay.
You need to admit to my husband that you are in love with him, or you need to leave him alone. You are ruining my relationship with my husband. You are ruining his professional opportunities because the team that they are on is not making any money.
Yeah.
So
this is just
Brick
for
is
you.
just bleeding money so that his best friend can play professional football with him.
Oh my God.
And Maggie's like, you need to admit that you love him and have that conversation with him, or you need to walk away.
You got to figure something out.
This is unsustainable.
Enough
It's
of this.
ruining our relationship. It's ruining our marriage. It's ruining your relationship.
I mean,
and it's ruining this football team.
Needlessly complicated.
She's like, you got to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Skipper attempts to seduce Maggie. Maggie's like, you know what? Fine. Prove to me that you're not gay.
Oh, I'm not getting any.
He can't. No. This was before.
He can't.
He can't. He can't prove to her that he's not gay. He can't follow through. And she's like, my work is done here.
He tries to seduce her and it doesn't work.
It doesn't happen.
So there's like a reckoning with his masculinity and it falls short. Okay.
And for a big Southern man who plays professional football, this is after, mind you, having the worst game of his career.
Kate, the stories I could tell you about big Southern men who play football.
Oh, I believe it. Oh, I believe it.
Ooh, Kate.
I believe it.
Before I was happily in love.
So Skipper calls Brick. We find out about that phone call about halfway through the play.
Okay. And these revelations are coming through the bedroom is the crazy thing.
All happening through the bedroom.
Yeah.
What we know at the start of the play is that Brick went out the night before. Brick he has quit his job as a sports commentator. He's become a dysfunctionally raging alcoholic. And he went out the night before Big Daddy's birthday to the high school where he used to jump hurdles. Sets up the high hurdles, breaks his foot.
Oh, okay.
Because he's an adult. He's not a practicing hurdle jumper. And as someone who recently watched her partner play in the 35-plus men's rec soccer game, these guys are getting hurt a lot because they still feel like they're 18 and they still feel like they can go do all the things that they did in college when they were playing at a high level. And for the most part, they can, but also you get to a point where your body cannot complete the actions that it could when it was 18 because you're not training like you're 18 and your recovery time is not like you're 18. And in Brick's case, he's drunk.
If you invite me to the next 35-plus recreational soccer game, I will bring chartreuse sodas. And
I love
can
that.
Sit on the sidelines and watch this unfold.
For the record, I think it's important to understand that my partner's team did win the league championships. They are quite good. They were undefeated all season.
Touche.
I don't think I can get away from this recording without telling everyone that.
Make sure they know. Make sure they know. He's no slouch.
No, he's very good. And the next season starts in September, so I'll bring you to a game.
Okay.
I've been to 2 games in 4 years.
Real. Yeah.
I'm not a sports ball kind of girly, but I do love to support my man. So
that's so real. So sweet. Okay.
Thank you. So Brick has a broken foot,
right?
Which is why the play takes place in his bedroom because he can't leave it. He's on crutches and he's drunk.
Forced to confront everything.
Well, because he can't leave, everyone is coming and confronting him.
Wow. Excellent.
Beautiful trapped audience.
Yeah.
And in the case of Paul Newman, truly just beautiful.
Because that was the adaptation, one of the ones that you...
One of the film adaptations. Okay, so the Paul Newman and Elizabeth Taylor adaptation. Here's the thing. Paul Newman, just my type. Gorgeous man. She is so ethereal that even when they are on screen together, you forget that he is there. And something that I think is so important when you look at any adaptation is who you cast and why you choose the people that you do, why the actors are so critical in each role that they are cast in. And Elizabeth Taylor and Paul Newman are so otherworldly gorgeous that even though the problems that they are dealing with are incredibly deep and pervasive in society, everyone else around them treats them like pretty people problems because they don't take someone that attractive seriously. You are rich, you are pretty. There is no way that your problems can be that deep.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Brick is dealing with the fact that his best friend has killed himself. And his wife was willing to sleep with his best friend.
Yeah.
He received a phone call from Skipper.
Mm-hmm.
And Skipper confesses his love to him. Brick doesn't answer him. Skipper hangs up. And then he kills himself. Brick would really like to blame Maggie for this because Skipper wouldn't have made that phone call if Maggie hadn't said shit or get off the pot.
Oh.
However,
yeah,
Brick didn't say anything.
Right.
He didn't continue to have that dialogue, and now the opportunity to have that conversation has been taken away from him. Gone. Hence the drinking.
Right.
Right? This person who is your best friend, your right arm, the other half of your buddy team that you've been playing with since like high school, college, pros, the person that is on the other side to you is gone. And your wife, whom you thought you loved, has been part of taking that person away from you.
Right.
But you were the other half in taking that person away from yourself.
And it sounds like instead of confronting that, he's drinking.
Well, he's drinking and he's not sleeping with his wife.
Okay, well.
And now she's getting blamed for them not having children and shamed for it because this is still 1955's Mississippi Delta. And so May, with her no-neck monsters and her million children, is like, well, we should obviously inherit because my husband has a good job, he doesn't drink, and we have all of these children. So we have people to, like, leave the family legacy to. Big Daddy, meanwhile, is like, Grouper's the worst and your children are nasty. And I think I can get Brick to stop drinking.
Straight up. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes. Big Daddy only likes Brick. He repeatedly tries to confront Brick, and he's like, we should talk. And Brick is like, we always have the same conversation over and over again. We have never had a conversation of any meaning ever in our entire lives. And Big Daddy at the beginning of the play is told that he's just been gone through all of these tests, these medical tests, and they're like, yeah, you're fine. At the end of the play, we will discover that they know that he has cancer and they know that he is dying. And the reason that they didn't tell him earlier is because they want him to enjoy his birthday party, which is diabolical.
That is diabolical.
So this man, thinking he has a new lease on life, goes out to confront everyone in his family because he's like, Big Mama, I did not like the way that when I got sick, you thought you could take over this family. You thought you could run things. You don't know anything. You are only here because I got you pregnant out of wedlock. I am not interested in your opinions. I don't like you as a person. Truly, this family is so awful.
What an awful family. Like, it's kind of hard to root for any of the characters, but their lives are unfolding nonetheless.
Their lives are unfolding over the course of the 2 hours that you're watching them. And it's crazy how much a single person can dislike everyone around them, especially when you know that they're the product of their environment and the people who raised them.
Yeah.
Which is something that comes up in most of Gothic
yeah,
novels.
Absolutely. Especially those really, because romanticism is very internal. We get into that later.
We're going to get that in our next episode.
That's literally coming up, yeah.
Stay tuned. But no, it's so crazy. And so Big Daddy's like, fine, you say we never have any real conversations. Are you gay? Which was taken out of the 1958 film adaptation. It's more like, what was going on between you and Skipper?
Why?
It was very subtle because there were morality, I don't want to say police, but rules about what could and could not go on screen. So May and Grouper's little kid who's running around carrying a Confederate flag in 1955, mind you, for the entirety of the film, fine.
Sure.
Brick being gay? Possibly. Skipper being gay? Definitely.
Absolutely not.
Not going to make the final cut.
You're kidding
Which Tennessee Williams was upset about. Paul Newman was upset about. The directors, the writers, everyone was very upset that these things were taken out of the final cut because this was the point of the play, was to address conversations that are hard, not just head on, but have open dialogues about things that people have not been talking about in 1955 America.
I mean, it's Gothic literature. It's punchy. It's supposed to be punchy.
Yes, it's holding up a mirror to society.
Absolutely. In 1958, goddamn. I'm sorry.
Yes. Well, and so things that are interesting in terms of, I've talked about how you cast things makes a difference in terms of how you see the show.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about this 1958 adaptation with the world's most gorgeous Elizabeth Taylor and Paul Newman, who we now know was an alcoholic, being cast as an alcoholic character,
Mm-hmm.
and like so pretty it hurts. And like, I wish Elizabeth Taylor's character Maggie has a moment where she says, I wish you at least got ugly like other drunks, because then maybe I would love you less.
Interesting.
But he still looks like Paul Newman, so that's not happening.
Also, the pretty people problems kind of...
pretty people problems are very pervasive.
And characterizes how they acted out as well.
And he's like, why don't you just leave me? And Maggie says that she feels like a cat on a hot tin roof. You know that it is dangerous to be there. It feels nice for a while, but you know that it feels dangerous. And at some point, this roof is going to burn you. But the jump down feels just as dangerous. And there's no net. There's no security. And especially for a woman who grew up in poverty, who is now married into wealth, she knows that this is her best opportunity at whatever life she's going to have. Her one shot at whatever it is that she hopes to get out of the life that she is in. There's a 2008 adaptation that has an all-black cast, which, having all-black owners of this plantation, dramatically changes
Absolutely.
how the audience views the story, even though the dialogue stays the same.
Yeah.
James Earl Jones played Big Daddy. And then, again, going to the interesting casting, Terrence Howard, who is like famously vocally homophobic, plays Brick. So what does it mean when we cast a homophobic person to play someone whose best friend is in love with them?
Yeah, and Brick isn't homophobic in this story. He's kind of... It seems like he doesn't want to talk about it.
He just doesn't want to address the fact that he might be the reason his best friend killed himself. Or the fact that he might have known the whole time that his best friend was in love with him and didn't do anything about it. And then your girl, Anika.
Noni Rose!
Anika Noni Rose. God, I wish I could have seen it.
I love me some her.
I love her so much. She's gotten me through some tough times.
Truly. Oh, what a woman.
Her voice is a gift.
What a woman.
If there's anything problematic about her, please don't tell me.
And quite frankly, like,
it.
whatever it is, they had it coming. They had it coming, and she is guiltless. God, I love that woman. What a talent.
Her voice on the soundtrack of Princess and the Frog has gotten me through some very dark times.
Her smile so in Dreamgirls, if you know, you know. I don't know what else. She is the dream.
She is the dream.
She is the dream.
Anyway, she played Maggie.
Wow.
So again, more pretty people problems.
Is this staged or is this recorded? Is this filmed?
No. I can't find a copy of it anywhere.
I will set myself on fire.
It was 2008. I'm so sorry.
I know y'all have it. I know it's somewhere out there.
Somewhere. James Earl Jones and Anika Noni Rose. And Terrence Howard.
Don't have to say anything. Send it to our email.
info@everyoneshouldread.com.
Absolutely.
Please and thank you.
Just send it right over.
We won't ask any questions.
No
we don't have to show it to anyone.
We will not share
it. If you don't want us to.
It will be purely internal.
Yeah. So anyway, we have all of these crazy concepts in both stories of family and expectation and the trauma that comes with these spoken and unspoken expectations of these Southern families, where you live, who you're related to, and how you are expected to behave, and the haunting of the narrative that is someone is gone.
Yeah.
Someone is, in Beloved, the ghost is there.
Very much
Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, the ghost of Skipper is haunting specifically Brick.
Yeah.
But then Maggie by association.
The absence is like recurrent as a narrative theme.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Brick talks about drinking until he feels this click in his brain where all of the pain and the emotions turn off. And everyone's like, okay, well, that's a problem.
Yeah. Yes.
And he's like, no, you don't understand. I cannot have this conversation until the click happens. They're like, you're not having this conversation at all. Whether the click happens or it doesn't, you need to face these demons.
And he doesn't by the end of the story, does he?
No.
It just ends unresolved.
It does. Well, it's only the course of one evening.
Yeah.
We don't have years to break down what happens. We don't find out if he and Margaret resolve their issues. We don't know how much longer Big Daddy lives. We don't know if Grouper and May are successful in I don't want to say
Acquiring the
stealing,
farm.
but acquiring
Yeah.
all of the property and land and resources that Big Daddy has access to. It's left up to viewer interpretation. And that's what I love about a play.
I agree.
It asks a lot of questions, and then it leaves the audience with trying to grapple with those answers.
I love plays that don't resolve. I really, really do. I love a play that doesn't resolve. I don't want to name drop a certain play that we'll be talking about in the next season, but
We got a couple of plays coming up in the next season.
and they are
Get excited.
Get excited. But I also, since we're in an era of sort of retellings, we have James, we have Trust by Hernan Diaz, which isn't necessarily a retelling, but it's sort of this like the idea of how a narrative changes within itself.
Yes, for the audience, James is a retelling of
Huck
Finn.
Finn. Yeah, sorry,
by
Huck Finn.
Mark Twain.
And there is another really big one that is like slipping my mind right now.
There are a few. It's gotten very popular recently.
And they're all quite good. That said, if we're going to be in an era of retellings, would love a contemporary rewrite of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof from the perspective of like Skipper's ghost's internal monologue watching this evening unfold.
I would. Oh, you.
I would eat that up.
You ate with that.
I can't write it. I simply cannot. I will not be the one to write it, but I will absolutely read it.
Yes.
I would love that. I would
This is the
absolutely
first you've
love that.
mentioned this to me, but I need it now.
Right? Isn't that like I would love it. I would. It doesn't even have to be a play. It can be a novel. It can be a play. Whatever.
Just make me cry a little.
Please. Oh God, I'm ready to sob.
I will say it's not a very long play. It's not a very long book. And I read it in one shot, and then I just sat there and stared off into middle distance for like an hour and a half, because to read about so many characters who actively, intentionally, emotionally harm one another because they're in pain themselves is rough.
Again, that's how that trauma reproduces itself.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
They
No
say hurt
one's
people hurt
resolving
people, but
anything. No one is reaching out and saying, what if we fix things? And the one time Maggie did do that, Skipper killed himself. So it's not.
And she doesn't do it very tactfully, to be fair, but yeah.
No.
But
no.
Being the one person to punch the veil and seeing what happens when that veil is punched is crazy.
Yeah.
And like the repercussions that she faces that I think are outsized.
Yes.
And I'm sure that's intentional on Williams's part, but
yes. Williams was also a gay man. So the grapple, and he came from a family where his father was abusive. His mother got them away from his father. His father was a traveling shoe salesman. Talk about a job that doesn't exist anymore.
What in the 1950s? Literally, what in the 1950s? Okay, sure, whatever.
Yeah,
Traveling shoe salesman.
He was born in the early 1900s. And so at this point, Tennessee Williams was the kind of author that motivates, inspires, and antagonizes a lot of people because he wasn't very good at first. And this speaks really to honing your craft because he was in college and he was getting like third place in poetry contest, or he was getting like honorable mention in writing contests. And he was like, I want to win. I want people to know my name.
Right.
I want my work to be lauded. And so this man wrote every single day for 50-something years. And his goal was a story a week, which is insane.
I mean, that's the fantasy, right? That's what everybody wants to be.
But he was writing poetry. He had prose, short stories, novels, plays. He was doing it all. And he won a Pulitzer for Streetcar Named Desire and also Cat on a Hot Tin Roof a couple years later. His most well-respected work was in the 40s and 50s. His partner, his longest-term life partner, passed away at the end of the 50s, early 60s, and both his life and his work went downhill after that. His family checked him into rehab several times. His work sort of took on an unknowable and ununderstandable quality, which is really heartbreaking.
Was that work published or was it not?
Some of it. It's out
I
there.
would read that.
And it's interesting because Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, the Pulitzer committee did not want to give it a Pulitzer, but Pulitzer III, who was the chair of the committee at the time, was like, no, this has to win.
Oh my goodness.
This has to win. And he overrode the whole committee to give Cat on a Hot Tin Roof the Pulitzer that year.
That is a crazy thing to. What year was that? What year was that?
The play came out in 1955, so it was the 1956 Pulitzer.
Oh my! To 1956 to be as wealthy as a Pulitzer with a book with this kind of theming, and for him to say, no, this is it.
It has to win. It has to win.
Wow.
And he'd already won for A Streetcar Named Desire a few years earlier, which takes place in New Orleans. There is an actual streetcar named Desire. And Tennessee Williams had spent time living in New Orleans and wrote it about his time there.
You know, I ought to read it. I haven't read that.
I own it. You can borrow it.
I would love to borrow it because that's speaking of books that we've been told we should read and should probably read. I would love
Add it to
read.
the list.
Yeah, for sure.
Tennessee Williams' work will break your heart.
I mean, the list is infinite. I'll put it at the top. You know, let's get the heartbreaking done early.
Yes.
Yeah.
But do you think?
Oh.
The question that we come to at the end of every podcast.
Naturally.
Drew, do you think everyone should read Beloved?
Yes. Yes. There is not quite a book that has done what Beloved does. Everyone has tried. There are books that people group in with Beloved and that are innovative and do amazing things, but they're doing their own innovative and amazing things. And I think Beloved does a really great thing. I think what she sets out to do with this book is so impressive. Also, speaking of somebody who writes every day, she wrote a lot of Beloved by hand on like a notepad on the train during her commute. And then she would go home and transcribe it. She's insane.
Well, and it's the kind of book that is at the top of every list. If you're like, great American novel, great Gothic novel, great magical realism, Beloved is at the top of every list. And we actually had several discussions about where we wanted to place Beloved, when we wanted to talk about it. It's Southern American Gothic, but it's also considered American Gothic. It's considered classic Gothic. It's considered Americana.
Absolutely.
It's considered magical realism. There are so many different things that it pulls from and incorporates as a story really beautifully and really effortlessly that we could have had this episode or this book in almost any episode.
It's true.
And we wanted to bring it early on because we will be referencing it.
We will. And also it's so like contiguous with the South. It is the South, right? It's such a great distillation of just the politics of the South and the economic structure of the South and like how the South settled into what it is.
Yes.
Great book.
Also, it answers the question, is Ohio the South?
What? Yeah, I guess it is.
I get a little bit. A little bit.
Should everyone read Cat on a Hot Tin Roof?
I think so.
Yeah?
I think it is the kind of book that is a quick read that will break your heart, but it will make you question the way that you speak to the people you love and you speak to the people you don't. And the way that you look at your family and the way that you hope your family looks back at you.
Oh, wow. That was a bar.
Thank you so much.
That was a bar. Also, one of the things that I really appreciate about Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is that it is a snapshot in ways that like many texts we kind of want them to be, but are not. But like it is truly like, as much as I love Beloved, like Beloved is a great book and it is sort of allegorical fiction, but you know, it was not written in obviously 18.
It was written in the 50s.
Yeah.
Both of these stories were written in the 50s, and that's why we paired them together.
But it's not actually like, you know, Reconstruction South, but Cat on a Hot Tin Roof was contemporary at the time it was written. And I think that I love texts like that. I really, really, really do.
Yes. Well, and if you have the opportunity to see an adaptation of it, please take the opportunity.
Oh my goodness. You know, depending on where you are.
There's so many different things that you can do with this story. There are characters that I didn't even get to. There's a reverend and a doctor who are both hanging around the house all day in hopes that when Big Daddy finds out that he is dying, they will bequeath him their fortune.
There's something to be said about that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Which is a whole other thing that we could get into for another half hour about, you know, being like, well, the church deserves new stained glass windows. And Big Daddy's like, why are you at my birthday party?
Literally, who are you?
Why
Wait
are
a minute.
You here?
Who are you?
Who invited you?
And on that note, who invited you? And on that note, I am Drew Sylva. I am a sociologist.
I'm Kate Waters. I'm a media production specialist.
And this was Everyone Should Read.
Thank you so much for listening, and tell your librarian we love them.